those just tuning in, this is the Newsroom PR webinar, the ABCs of the online media interview. We've been doing so much online work, remote work, doing Zoom calls with our clients. It really did not drop off during the pandemic. We had to come up with some new ways to get the interviews, but really if we actually saw an increase in the first 3 months. So for those just joining in, this is Newsroom PR, and what we do is we get, in a nutshell, great press for legal experts. My name is Howard Brewer. I am the CEO of Newsroom PR. I don't really like to use words like CEO or boss, because really we are a collaborative of journalists, PR experts, marketing experts, who collaborative across the country of folks who get great press, mostly for lawyers. There's legal PR and there's litigation PR. Legal PR is getting you press for just things going on in the world, not necessarily a case where you have any kind of dog in the fight. And litigation PR is getting you press for the different types of cases you have. Today our two guests are Melissa MacBride, who is our broadcast specialist. And Melissa, she's joining us right now from her home headquarters, as everyone has one. And also going to be joining us today is Joseph Lowe, one of our favorite clients, and some particularly good reasons why he's joining us today, because the things he's mastered on TV go way beyond just the sort of, lighting technical issues that we'll get a little bit into, and that Melissa's going to be talking us about, and you'll see why he is eminently qualified to speak about this. It's been a tough year for a lot of folks, and what I've heard through the grapevine from a lot of other publicists is, darn, I just can't get our client on TV. I can't get them any press because it's all Donald Trump and coronavirus 24/7. And, we have a little bit different approach. So those obstacles really aren't obstacles for us in the same way as they are to other operations. For one thing, we added some services such as coronavirussources.com, coronaviruslegalsources.com. I mean, in a nutshell, we have already for years been focused on getting in front of the press, giving them the help on the stories that they're already covering, giving the reporters the answers to the questions that they haven't thought of yet, and helping them advance their stories. One of my colleagues the other day used the term DIFT, do it for them, and what that means and how that differentiates us from our competitors is, and Melissa and I think we both saw this for many years. Melissa was an on-air reporter for KBC TV here in Los Angeles for 16 years. And I spent, close to 30 years as a print journalist. I don't even want to do anything that feels good for that long. But we saw just way too many publicists who would say, hey, here's my guy, you figure out what to do with them. And our approach is very different. DIFT means we're going to go to the reporter and say, hey, we see the story, we see the holes in the story, we've read all the coverage, and everybody's story seems to ask this question and call out for a legal analyst to answer the question. And we not only provide that legal analyst, but we'll work first with that analyst to answer the questions that the reporters haven't gotten around to asking, so that when we approach the journalists, it's kind of like, here's some sound bites, here's what you would hear if you interviewed Joseph Lowe today. And that's how we can pull off things like getting 3 clients at a time in a USA Today story, which we did just a couple of weeks ago. You can see a lot of these placements on our Facebook page, Newsroom PR on Facebook. And you could also see a ton of them on our YouTube page. And Matt, our marketing person and engineer, is going to be posting some of those links in the Q&A box as we go along, as well as answering a lot of other questions we might not have time to get to on camera. So I don't want to talk too much today. This, Melissa and Joey, really the stars of the show, so I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Melissa MacBride. Thanks so much, and thank you. All yours.
Thanks, Howard. So I've been with Newsroom PR for a little over a month now, and those of you who were ABC7 viewers may remember me. I was there from 2002 to 2018, and I covered a lot of the hard news, as we say, a lot of the crime stories, court cases, fires, mudslides, and the occasional weather story, which for me, I would prefer always the snow stories instead of all the rain coverage. I relocated to New England, and that's where all of my family is. And I chose at that time to make a career change and transition into communications and PR, because that's a really natural fit for somebody like me who was a member of the media. So that's what brings us to today. And as we've all been watching news over the last 10 months since the pandemic began, we've all seen how it's changed, how it's being presented, how it's being gathered by news reporters. And it used to be when we as reporters and photographers would go interview someone, we'd make sure that your lighting was great, make sure that your background wasn't distracting, your camera angle made you look good. And that's not the case now, because whoever's being interviewed, you are now your own photographer. And so there were some examples, and I was just watching over the last week and did some screenshots, some of the don'ts, not so much the do's. Hopefully this scene that you're seeing, the way we are positioned, is more of a do. And Howard has some of these shots that I sent, and the most recent one was last night. And this was one with Chris Cuomo on CNN. So if we can pull that one up, and this is the issue of what we call headroom. So when you have a shot set, you want to make sure that your head is not at the very top of your screen. This is what's called headroom. So if he can get that one showed to everybody, hopefully. The problem there is the person had the chyrons, and there's a lot going on the screen. That person wouldn't necessarily know that, but if they had angled their camera down, or if it's a case of using your laptop, propping up your camera, adjusting things so that your head is not at the very top of the screen, then you wouldn't have the chyrons that are coming over the side of that person's face. So that's something to be aware of. The other picture, if we can pull that one up, I think is a good one, because it shows how a number of people, and this was, yeah, if we get to that one, it had a couple of different images. So one, are you guys seeing that?
Just a second.
No.
I don't
Yeah,
know why it's paused. I'm trying to get
Yeah, okay, I don't see it just yet.
Okay. You see it now?
Last one play here.
Okay.
Is it up there?
Nothing.
No,
Okay.
I don't see it.
All right. Let's see.
Yeah.
How's that?
There we go. Okay. So different networks here. So we have an attorney who's being interviewed by Fox News, and his camera angle is very low. The gentleman next to him, he's being interviewed on PBS NewsHour. The person on the bottom left, the camera angle is not only awkward, there's a lot of light on his face. And on the bottom right is an attorney with his client. This was the case in Chicago just recently, where the police had gone into the wrong apartment. And in all of these cases, the camera angles are low, and it's never a flattering angle on anyone. So that's just something to be aware of, because once you do land an interview, and hopefully it's us who's helping you get that interview, you want to present yourself in the very best light. One of the other things to keep in mind in terms of a background is to have something that's not too distracting. So books, if you're sitting far enough away from them, you're not really able to read the titles, hopefully. But I've found myself when I'm watching someone do an interview, and if they're very close to a bookcase, I'm not paying attention to what they're speaking, and I'm finding myself looking at, oh, what are they reading? just kind of curious about that person. And unfortunately, that takes away from the message that that person is trying to get across. And also, a couple other things. I'm sitting in a chair where I'm comfortable and I have my arms like this. But when I've done some other interviews, I'm usually sitting in a chair that's kind of uncomfortable so that my posture is correct and I don't have a tendency to get too comfortable and too laid back. Now, Joey's in a very comfortable chair there, and I know it rocks a little bit and it's very comfortable, but I try to always sit in a chair where I'm not going to be tempted to do anything that might potentially take somebody's attention off of what I'm trying to say. And of course, in an interview, you might only have 10 or 15 seconds of a soundbite that's being played, and you want to make sure that you're being heard. So those were some of the things in terms of the aesthetics and how you want your shot to look. But one of the key things that I think really matters, and as a reporter, it is preparation. So when you are interviewing someone, you want to make sure that that person is going to be able to give you what you need for your story. And the best way to go about that is to find out, what is the reporter's angle? What does this person want to get from me so that I can formulate my thoughts? And what are some of the questions that they're going to ask me? And it's perfectly okay to ask those questions in advance. Hey, what's your angle? What time is the story going to be on? And what are some of the questions you're going to ask me? And then that way you can be much better prepared. And you also want to know the type of format. And that's key because there are very different types of formats. So a lot of what Joey's been doing since we've been working with him is doing the longer format where you get to talk a lot more. So court TV interviews, law and crime, where you get to be much more conversational and you're having that chat with other attorneys, you're having that chat with the host, versus something like doing a story where you're going to be potentially only one element in a story that a reporter is doing for TV, for example, and they may only have a minute and 30 seconds to tell that story. Therefore, you want to make sure that the sound bites that you're giving are going to be around 15 to 20 seconds and wanting to keep things short and concise. Because if you're giving an interview and your answers are very long and very drawn out, you can't take 30 seconds out of a story that's only going to be about a minute and 30 on tape. So it's very important to know that. And also in terms of a live interview, a lot of times it used to be done on set. And now those are live interviews that might be done between an anchor and an interviewee. And if it's a 2 to 3 minute segment, you definitely want to be aware of the time so that you can try to get as much across in that time. But I want to see if Howard has any questions or if anybody has any questions.
Well, one thing I'm wondering, we've both interviewed a lot of different subjects, including many attorneys over the years. My last gig as a staff writer was 9 years at People magazine. I was covering a lot of the, different crime, civil stories and quoting attorneys all the time. And I wanted to ask you first, so from your experiences, what certain things would some of these attorneys do that would either have you think, oh man, I'm never using this guy again, or wow, he's really good, I'm going to tell everybody to use him?
You definitely want someone who's not boring. Having someone who is going to come across as being authentic and very energetic, that's going to be a much better soundbite. And I think about, some of the first cases that I covered when I first came to Los Angeles, and one of them, and I'm sure a lot of you will remember this, in Beverly Hills, Winona Ryder, when she was brought up on the shoplifting charges. And that was the first time that I had ever met and interviewed Mark Geragos. And I thought, this guy's pretty good. He's great. And then, of course, there were many more cases between Scott Peterson, Michael Jackson, other cases where, he was involved. Mm-hmm. So I definitely was more drawn to having somebody that was going to be a good soundbite, quote unquote. And by good, the ums and ahs, right? If somebody is having a hard time getting their point across and there are a lot of ums and ahs and pauses, that makes things a little awkward and it's just not a good soundbite.
Mm-hmm. Mark's been on the scene for so long. I think he falls into that category of, almost being famous for being famous. And, aside from the fact that, when you've got the case, like Michael Jackson, Winona Ryder, Scott Peterson, there's going to be a throng of reporters trying to talk to you and buy you a scotch. regardless of whether you are really good at knowing how to talk to the media in an exciting way, but can you pinpoint any specific things that he did along those lines that really helped boost your enthusiasm for wanting to interview him?
I would just say he was charismatic, and he kept your attention, and you just kind of wondered what's he gonna say next. And I thought that he was great on TV, as well as being someone that I would interview live. So if I saw him doing an interview with Anderson Cooper, I remember thinking, this guy is really good on camera. And I think it can take a little while for somebody to feel comfortable. And it's just a matter of doing more and more TV interviews, because everybody gets the jitters. And, just with him, he just was as smooth as can be. Tom Mesereau was another person that I thought was good on camera as well.
Right. Maybe we should, just to be faithful to our theme here, talk a little bit more about the pandemic. As you talk to different news directors around town, I think part of the question is, what are they looking for in terms of, subject matter, things for people to say. And there's also the question of, how are they physically doing things differently? In other words, they're not doing as many of the live shots, especially with legal experts, people like Lori Levinson, people like our clients. They're doing more like the Zoom interview, the Skype interview. We have a client on right now doing a, Skype interview on Court TV, Jamie White out of East Lansing, Michigan. Can you talk a little bit about what you're hearing from how things are done differently right now?
Oh, sure. Well, just the way things are even being put together. So you have a lot of people that are not physically in newsrooms. You'll have people who are working from home on the assignment desk. They've even been producing newscasts at home, and they have a lot of reporters that don't even go into their building. So they have photographers that will literally go out and shoot everything. And you might have a reporter do an interview, over speakerphone, or give the photographer questions to ask. And that's just to try to limit the number of people that are going in and out of the building. They actually even had bathrooms outside. A number of stations had done that because of wanting to make sure that people weren't going into the building and that transmission and the concern. They've also had people that are, one team of a reporter and photographer working together for many, many months, whereas you used to work with different people almost every day. So they've changed the way that they're doing things in that respect. But one of the things that's changed that's to an attorney's advantage, a lot of you mentioned Lori Levinson being a law school professor. And when we would need legal experts, it would be a lot easier to get somebody on camera who is a professor, because their schedule would be more accessible. If we wanted to get so-and-so, but, well, they're going to be in court all day. Well, they've got a trial. They're not going to be available. We can't get them on camera for an interview for the story that we need at 4, 5, or 6 p.m., for example. But now that so many people are not physically in courthouses, there's more flexibility in terms of getting an attorney on camera, because you can do that Zoom interview because so many people, attorneys as well as reporters, are working from home.
Yeah, one of the points that I think is interesting to latch onto there, when you watch the newscast, 6 p.m., 11 p.m., or whatever, it still feels like, wow, this is this impenetrable thing, like the newscast, like they're in a studio behind gates and security and,
They are.
magnetic cards. And the reality is, no, a lot of the folks who are going to actually interview people are, they're home in their basement with a banner behind them. And but to get a little bit more granular on that for a minute, so I'm an attorney. I want to try to do this myself, and I want to talk about some breaking story. I want to get the media's attention. I've seen different attorneys just online going about it different ways. They just kind of interview themselves, like post some video to social media and try to get, as many news directors as social media connections as possible, so they're watching those videos. So that's one idea. What ideas do you have for the at-home do-it-yourselfer attorney who wants to get on during the pandemic right now?
Well, I think for social media is important, and I was very much involved with social media on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for ABC7 because that's what I needed to do. I've been able to take a little bit of a step back. So don't judge me by the importance for social media just because I don't post as frequently as I used to. And I had made my personal Instagram private, whereas it had been, public for all these years. So it is very important for attorneys to be, doing some self-promotion for sure. But I think the way that it works, at least with us for Newsroom PR, and what I think attorneys need to think about in terms of why do what I have to say, why does that matter? Who's going to want to hear what I have to say and in what context? And having been a reporter, I can understand where that would fit in. And it needs to be something that's timely. It needs to be something that's news of the day and what people are talking about. And there can be a subject that is a great story, but 2 days later, it can be kind of potentially old news and that the news cycle will have moved on. So in terms of thinking about what can I add to it and really what do I bring to the table, I think are the most important things to think about.
Mm-hmm. Anything else you want to?
Yeah, just a quick example, because sometimes there might be a good story and somebody might pitch a good story. And I remember being on the receiving end of, hey, this would be a great story, but it's not something that we're going to do today. And so I think the way that it works for us is thinking about why would this story be different? Why is this something that they would want to cover? And so, for example, the story that we had down in San Diego that was the 2 lawsuits that were being filed, and this was with DeWitt Lacey, one of our clients. Well, there had been a previous lawsuit related case had been filed. And so when I was talking to some of the stations in San Diego on the phone, they had said, oh yeah, we just covered that. And I said, well, actually, I needed to explain to them why, yes, this is a similar case in terms of, yes, there's another lawsuit being filed, but what's new about this is there's video and pictures of the family that you've not seen. And this was an in custody death case. And also the fact that the person who witnessed the excessive use of force that ended her father's life, she's a witness and she's never spoken to the media before. So that puts well, this is something new. This is something that's a first, and it's new, but it's also a follow-up to a story that we've done. And therefore, it just makes it a little bit more relevant. And so there was coverage of it, and a news conference was held. So that was a little bit different, but news conferences are being held, obviously, socially distanced ones, and people wearing masks. So we were able to get news coverage on that story.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I observe is that when folks are attorneys are trying to promote themselves, they see things as, lawyers would see them as opposed to how journalists will see them. And they need to learn to, if not hire a PR firm, just learn how to get out of their own way. For instance, we were talking with a client recently about what kind of lawsuits you can file over COVID, and as you know, that's such a huge mess because the insurance companies aren't really covering businesses for COVID, and trying to bridge that gap has been one of the sticking points in the stimulus talks right now. And the attorney was like, well, it's just hard to file a lawsuit right now over COVID, so that's not a good topic. Next. And what he doesn't understand is, well, as an attorney evaluating whether you would take a certain case, yeah, that's probably how you would promote it. But the way the journalist might see it, we would come in, having media brain and knowing how to pitch it, and like, yeah, we know, don't be an apologist for the story, just tell the story. If the story is that, all these lawsuits that you want to file or should file are going to be a million times more an uphill battle than you think they will be, then I think that is actually a provocative angle that the attorneys might not see, and that's, you know, where we come in. Anything else on the issues of how folks should, you know, light themselves? I think people try to do a lot of fancy things with Ring cameras, and my big lighting trick is face the window. It doesn't have to be super high tech, and
Right.
people get too caught up in some of those details, how they decorate the background behind them. They have the maid come in first to clean everything up. Do they keep the Bruce Springsteen bobbleheads on the wall unit behind them?
Yeah, just don't be backlit, you know, would be the term, so that if it's daytime, and obviously, you know, it's nighttime here, if you're sitting with your back to the window and it's daytime, that's not going to help.
Right.
You want to be the other way. You want to be facing the sun, basically, or where the light is coming in.
Right.
But I think that's a lot. I think I've summed up a lot of the aesthetics.
Yeah.
If someone has a question, you know, throw it in the chat and we'll try to get to it.
Yeah.
And I think,
well, we're going to save some questions for the end too. I wanted to kind of take it to the next level, because then there's the question of what happens when you actually get on TV. And one of the things that we've been doing, God, it seems like practically every day, sometimes having clients on shows, you know, like the Court TV panels. In fact, we've done something a few times where it's the dream team, as Vinnie Politan calls it, and because all 3 seats are filled by Newsroom PR clients, and there's a whole separate art there of how to participate in the panel conversation. And, you know, we've had a whole rotating roster of, you know, newsroom clients appearing on these shows throughout the course of the year. They've all come along tremendously, doing great, loving it, getting a lot of great interest on all types of different levels because of it, promoting their brand, getting bigger cases. But the one lawyer, I have to confess, who I most enjoy watching is Joseph Lowe. And Joey and I were talking about this last night, right after his appearance on Court TV. It was, you know, a lot of fun. He was talking about some of the big cases, the McStay case and the George Floyd case. And what I like is Joey is not, when Joey's on TV on those panels, he's not on TV, in the sense that he is, and Joey knows exactly where I'm going with this. He is on, he's in the courtroom at the same time, because there are certain things that Joey has mastered. Now, for those who don't know, Joseph Lowe, he's a star, you know, civil attorney. He's with the Arash law firm. He's also worked as a criminal defense attorney in cases like Conrad Murray and Suge Knight. He's been an amazing, groundbreaking military criminal defense attorney, first one to use TBI and PTSD as a defense in these, you know, Marine murder cases. But one of the things that's, so, and he also teaches at the Jerry Spence Trial Lawyers College, and he's been involved with that for, sorry, I don't remember the exact, it's a couple of decades. And there are certain tricks, you know, about conquering your fear, getting past your ego, you know, and connecting, you know, with the jury in kind of a fearless way that he seems to have instinctively translated to how he talks in these panel shows and becomes so engaging. And I don't want to do you're talking for you, Joey. Can you elaborate on that a little bit, and you know, where you go with this?
Well, let me try. So what I hear you saying, Howard, is that when I'm sharing my thoughts or my opinions, which I'm asked to do on national television or in these cable programs, I spend a decent amount of time asking myself these questions so that I can do what Melissa has told us to do, and it is this. I ask myself, what about this case or this topic do I feel passionately about? I'm going to ask that question and answer it because I want to remove what I call the analysis paralysis syndrome. I think we've all heard of that and we know what that means. In other words, lawyers tend to show up feeling, oh, I'm supposed to sound smarter than everybody and look smarter and act smarter. And as a result, it turns you into penguin head. And you're like, yes, contextually speaking, on this particular day, the witness didn't affirmatively say, and what? There's no you there. So instead, what I say is, okay, like on the George Floyd case, let's suppose, we all know what the facts are, we've seen the videos, but what is it precisely that I feel the most passionately about in this particular day or interview? For example, yesterday, the question which I didn't know was going to be asked, because on these formats, you do not know exactly what Vinny's going to say or how he's going to say it. You have to think on your feet. And he says to me, aha, look, there's a new video now that just surfaced. And he blows it up and he look inside of George Floyd's mouth and he says, see that? And it gets circled. You can see that little white thing in there. They're now saying that that's fentanyl and that's a pill and that's what actually killed George Floyd. So what do you think about that, Mr. Lowe? And here's what I thought, and here's my response. And how do I feel about it? And was this. I said, you know, that is the same old tired defense that the cops always use, which is he must have been crazy. He was on PCP, angel dust, whatever it is. And the point to answer your question, Howard, is that I didn't care anymore about if I sounded smart or if I looked like a lawyer. What was important to me is to speak from my heart. So you have to get clear on what that is. You have to be aware of what you're feeling, get rid of all the crap that you're afraid of or you have jitterbugs over. That's just self-preservation. And you have to get real with yourself. So preparation is very, very important in order to do that. Also commitment to understanding material and mostly to listen to your inner voice and have the guts and the courage to say what it is you feel as opposed to what you think. Very important.
Right. And I get the impression that you are focusing, this might be another area where you differentiate yourself from the other panelists. I almost said that your competitors, but you're kind of, you know, it's kind of both for you, because you're focusing not only on trying to say something, you know, what is your opinion, your take on this, sound intelligent, but you're trying to sort of dismantle the case being made by the other panelists at the same time if they take anywhere's near where an opposing viewpoint from you. And what I pointed out to you is that I think you do that in a courtroom as well as on TV, and maybe that's a skill that a lot of other attorneys out there aren't doing enough of that in either situation.
Well, this is one of the things that I teach at Jerry Spence's ranch, and that is that if we have a saying, and the saying is, if you are arguing, you are losing. And what you see virtually every one of the panelists on these different programs that you book me on is that they're arguing. And what we have found is that what works better is if you tell something that's more in along the line of a story format. And that activates the listener's imagination, which means it heightens or increases their participation. Melissa has commented and alluded to these same techniques or facts when she's saying what you need to do, what you should not do, and what makes an engaging or charismatic person as opposed to the proverbial talking head, which that's the one sure cure for insomnia, is the talking head. So that leaves us then with the how. Everyone always wants to ask how you do that. I always say that once you get really clear on the why and the what, then and only then will the how present itself. Okay, what does that mean? Again, I have to get really clear on why I'm doing this and what about it, or why is it important? How I feel about it. Why am I passionate about this? Why does this need to be said? Why do I care? And if I don't care, I know nobody else is going to care. So let's make sure we're talking about what I care about with combining that with preparation. Then two, the connection comes from my willingness to not be me when I'm saying it, so to speak, acting me, but I actually slip out of my hide and I slip into the hide of my listener. And what I do is I ask myself, what are they feeling? What do they want to hear? What would be the most helpful for them? One of the gifts that I was given, I certainly didn't earn any of it, was that my mother's side of the family, all of them are former teachers. My grandmother, my aunts, my cousins, my mother, both my sisters, they're all teachers. And I was a teacher at the university when I was a former cancer researcher. And so what I have figured out is, rather than telling people what to think, what to study, what to know, what to believe, and accept my opinion as if it's a fact, I try and present it in a way that allows the person to actually receive what I believe is the only true gift that you can give anybody. And that is the gift of information. Take that goal, put it in a story format, and I guarantee you, you will connect with the listener and you will transfer that information and they will remember it. And mostly, they'll remember how it made them feel. That's very important to be aware of.
You know, as I meet a lot of lawyers around town, they learn what I do and they try to impress upon me what they've done. And they'll tell me about the, 23-second CNN appearance that they did during the Bush administration, and, I think you come across folks like that a lot who think that, oh, I just need to get on TV that one or two times, and I'm going to be replacing Mark Garrigus or Jeffrey Toobin, and we're talking about them maybe not understanding what it's really about, and that it's about an ongoing promotion and the long game, and one or two TV appearances do not automatically deliver you to the land of milk and honey, I think was the term you used. Tell us a little bit about that. What do you think about these folks, and can you set them straight?
You can go down to Hollywood Boulevard on any day of the week, watch the bus come by and stop at the stop, and watch young people get off the bus who look around with, little stars floating around their head, these big doughy eyes, and they have dreams that all it's going to take is somebody to notice them, and the producers and the writers and the directors will all do the rest, and they'll just turn from zero to huge, Marilyn Monroe overnight. Well, I'm here to tell you those days are long gone. The people who are currently filling the top spots are doing so because they're making it look easy. And as a result, you don't get to see all of the preparation, the hard work, the experience, and the training that, honestly, Howard, you and Brenda and Matt and Melissa have been working with me on, so that you look like you know what you're doing. That takes a lot of effort and, again, a lot of commitment. And I am here to tell you that before I started working with you all, I had a lot of press. None of it was anything that I asked for. It's just I have represented a lot of high-profile cases, both international as well as national, and have had to been in front of the camera a lot, even though I don't like it because I don't like to talk about my case. But that wasn't good enough to do what I'm doing now. And to do what I'm doing now, I have to be able to understand rhythm, flow, timing. Mostly timing. I have to be able to read when I've got a 20-second slot, when I got a 30-second or bigger, and that's an intuition and your ability to listen. Every single time I have now worked on these programs, I have had Matt right there with me and John. Most of the time it's you, not in the same room. Of course, you're at your place. Brenda gives me all of the information I need to study the day before and the day of, and then keeps me going while the programs are going for subtle shifts. And this is important because I can't do all of that on my own and work with what I'm having to do as my job. So I've got a team behind me who's very experienced on what it takes to be successful and trains you along the way to bring out your gifts, your qualities, your abilities, so that those things shine and carry today, so that you're not on the camera constantly terrified that you're too long, too short, too mean, too quick, too slow,
Right.
like sometimes I am. And I'll instantly get feedback from you, Howard, because we do our a text thing, and he's like, okay, I need a little faster, etc. That is what has gotten me to where I am now. And those things are what it really takes in order for you to get where you're wanting to go. You don't get to show up to this race. If you want to win, you got to train for it.
Right. And I think so playing the long game and getting a lot of practice, I think there's some, parallels there between, needing to be on TV again and again and again, similar to what one does as an attorney. Melissa was talking earlier in the webinar about covering the Winona Ryder trial, which was Mark Garrigas's, and, not Mark's best. I mean, he shouldn't have brought that case to trial, and he lost publicly. And if he'd have stopped there and tried to coast the rest of his career on that experience, he wouldn't be even in our conversation today, would he? But I want to talk about the flip side of it too, is that, we come across attorneys who just have a bias. I don't think it's good at all to talk to the media, even before this enemy of the state crap that we've heard a lot of over the past 4 years. I think there are a lot of attorneys out there who just, for whatever reason, had a bias, thinking, I'm just staying away from the media. I just, maybe they can help this. Maybe there's a way to do this. I don't really see a clear path there, and I've heard some bad stories, so I'm just gonna stay far away with the 10-foot pole. And do you come across those biases as well? And what do you tell those folks, or what do you make of what they have to say?
That's exactly who I was, and actually, to a large degree, who I still am. I am of the opinion, do not try your case in the media, because usually you have no control over what they're going to actually show, print, and how they're going to either put it in or take it out of context, or what it's going to sound like. Also, a lot of times there's a lot of legal reasons, which we won't get into now as to why. However, one thing I have learned actually since working with you and your team is that I get to decide what, if anything, I will put out there. And then what you are all very good at is, first of all, editing it so that it makes sense, because lawyers have no common sense. We think we know exactly what we're saying, and to the listener, it sounds like Greek. What the hell did that lawyer just say? Who knows? So that part and that process is enormously important. But here's the key that has really made a difference. And that is that you shop it, or you offer it to those people or those journalists or those entities or those publications that you have a lot of experience with, and you know or can predict for the most part how it's going to look or turn out. In other words, who you can trust. Look, let's call it what it is. Life's about relationships. And if I came out here as a lawyer and said, you know what, I suddenly want to start having some media attention, I have to now go out and try and figure out those relationships, develop those relationships, look for them. And how do I know they're the right ones, good ones, bad ones? Are they just wasting my time? It's going to be a lot of mistakes I'm going to make. The way you saved me all this time and energy and failure is your relationships that were developed and made, especially Melissa's as well, from actually working in the trenches. You're not lobbyists for the press field or for the communications field. You are the real deal and have been, and you have some extraordinarily good connections all over the country, which I'm very impressed with, because I've never met anybody like that who did. And I've been on all the programs before for other cases, but your relationships and the time you've spent working with those people have gained you credibility, connections, access, information, behind the scenes, equity, that I get to benefit from. And
Yeah,
so,
the
go ahead.
insider knowledge is, I think, huge, because there are also plenty of times where something might be a good story for print, for example, but it's not necessarily going to be a good TV story. And I can explain that because if it's a story that we don't really have video that we can put to it, it makes it a much harder sell to a TV station. Whereas the LA Times might do something extremely, in depth. Whereas TV is going, what video do I have to even cover this with? And so kind of knowing what story is right for what media outlet and what format is, I think, what's really helpful for us.
Thank you for that. If I can just finish with, for example, I tend to be too wordy. Imagine that. Working with Terry Kaufman, for example, she's a genius when it comes to taking my story and getting it told in my style, but editing it in a way that is fun to read, engaging, keeps the reader connected, and it removes all my proliferated, ridiculous words. See, there they are right there.
Yeah.
Sure.
So, so that's a good point. And Terry, you mentioned Brenda, and they are, sort of hybrids in the sense that they are journalists, PR people, and they're also lawyers. So there's a lot of times where we are actually, more cautious about these things, than their clients are. Like, oh, you don't want to put that out there, Joey, or maybe we'd say that to a different client. This and that could happen. So to be fair about this, we talk about the bias that's out there in the legal community. Is the fair thing to say that that bias just isn't warranted, or it is warranted? You got to be careful which operation you work with, just like you have to be careful if you're going to partner with a lawyer, which lawyer are you going to work with? Is somebody who's going to compliment you, who's going to up your game, or is somebody who's going to make a big mess of things? So is a fair thing to say, like, it's smart to work with PR, but you have to be careful which firm you're working with?
So, yes, especially question number one, are there biases out there? Absolutely there are, and there are well-earned biases. I say that because lawyers and their license have to be aware of so many different rules just not to get into trouble. Forget even being able to do the job. And then even there's a ton more rules. So there's a lot of fear and judgment and concern you're not doing it right. Having the lawyers you do work for your field brings a lot of sanity and a lot of feelings of safety, because you know that they are very well aware of what is acceptable, what is not, and then where your style points can be developed. So that's incredibly important to do. Lastly, yes, having you all do it. Look, I didn't want to do it, and I took a recommendation from another lawyer, and I said I'll give it a try. But I'm skeptical, very, and I've never really been a fan of the press. Sorry, it's called what it is. I'm telling the truth. You've heard all the stuff lately, but I'm doing it now because you all proved to me time and time again you wouldn't use me, you wouldn't lie to me, you would protect me, you would work to make me better. You don't give me the sunnier side of life and say, oh, you were wonderful, when you know that, look, we need to get right down to it. Here's what you got to do. Here's what you don't do. No one massages. They actually work you out. There's some growth, and as a result, you improve. And now you become marketable, even when you didn't think you were. But the key is it's your credibility. And then probably the biggest thing I would say that is the most impressive to me, and it's the thing I look for in lawyers, is you care. Anybody can get somebody to take their money or to promise them a lot, but you all take the time to get to know the person, and you spend an enormous amount of time, Howard, with me and asking me questions that had nothing to do with what I was hoping was going to happen at work. You're all about the story, the human story. What is it about me? That's what I do with my clients. And I've always said to lawyers when I teach them, your clients don't want someone who's a smart lawyer necessarily, or went to a good law school. You know who they want? They want someone who loves them and cares about them and is willing to fight for them. And that's what I look for, and that's how you've all treated me since day one.
Well, thank you very much. I was wondering if we had any other questions come in. I know Matt's been fielding a lot of them in the Q&A there. And Matt, did you have any other questions that people wanted to throw out or wanted to share one of the best questions that we've had, share with the class? Hearing a no from Matt. Okay. Well, listen.
I'm reading a question here. Is the point of press coverage communicating to the public to shift attitudes and to so impact the outcome, or is the point more about publicity for the law firm / lawyer?
Yeah, it's not really a one-size-fits-all kind of thing, is it? I mean, you know, folks think, well, should I get press on this and should I not get press on this? And, you know, do you do press conferences? And tell me if you think I'm, you know, hitting this question head on. But just like lawyers, like Joey Lowe are strategists, we are strategists, and we're not going to have a, you know, one-size-fits-all answer to things. As I was saying at the beginning of the webinar, you know, we kind of flip back and forth between, you know, doing the legal PR, meaning just hacking you into the biggest stories of the day, even if you never heard of it 5 minutes ago, we know how to get you into that story, and you know, better than your competitor who's been following it for weeks. And then there's the litigation PR, which is my favorite because I spent so many years as a crime and courts reporter, different media outlets ranging from New York Times to People magazine to Reuters, is when the client calls and says, well, I've got this huge case that we're going to be filing in 2 weeks. This is what it's about, and what do you think we should do? Because it's not a one size fits all answer as to the part of whether we're doing it to promote the case or promote the firm. I think if you're doing it right, it's doing both.
Well, I think, you know, I can think of a couple of examples where, yes, it's getting coverage for the attorney and the law firm, but it's also exposing a huge issue. I won't get into the details, but you may remember there was an elementary school teacher at Miramonte School, and he was brought up on a number of lewd conduct charges, very disturbing case. And there were a number of families that had sought an attorney, and the school district was in major hot water as a result of that case. And so that was a story that was going to have press coverage no matter what. Didn't matter who the attorney was, it was going to be a huge story. And somebody was the voice for these parents. So in that case, for example, press coverage served both.
Right. I think it's important to look at, you know, again, just like this happens in the courtroom, we look at what the goal is. You know, so for instance, if you know, if we were putting out the news about Joey Lowe got, you know, like this record verdict out in Bakersfield last year. I mean, obviously the trial's already played out, the jury's already come in, they've awarded this verdict. You know, the defense is fuming, and obviously if we're putting a story out at that point, it's to get press for the lawyer. However, if we're talking about a case where somebody attacked somebody, and you know, maybe it's one of our civil rights attorneys, and you know, there's a cop who did a certain thing, and you know, assaulted somebody. It's a George Floyd kind of thing, or something not as severe, and maybe at that moment the attorney is looking to get more clients. Maybe the attorney is looking to get witnesses. maybe the attorney would love to have a feature on page 1 of the local newspaper, you know, somewhere in, I don't know, during voir dire or before that. So, you know, the important thing is, you know, a lot of these are not one size fits all. You know, we take the time to listen. What's going on? Should this be a press conference? How should we do the press conference? Maybe it's not a press conference. Maybe the better thing to do is to get, you know, one media outlet to cover it first and do it really well, because in a lot of these things, where the media is concerned, depending on the subject matter, they don't want to be first, but everyone wants to be first to be second. And then you do the press release or the press conference when that story breaks and when the lawsuit's filed. And then there's this great sort of template that the rest of the media has to work from in the form of that first media hit, right? So.
There's another question here. Any advice for a very junior lawyer and former TV reporter who wants to get into legal commentary?
Yeah, start doing it. I mean, we've talked about the how through a lot of this webinar here. I think that, again, some folks feel like they just need to make that one perfect connection or have that one perfect television appearance. And as Joseph Lowe was saying, you know, it's not about that. It's about being relentless, because you know what? I mean, if I'm working with someone who's pretty new, who's kind of junior, maybe the first few things we're going to want you to do are things kind of on the opposite that nobody sees. We want you to get good first. You know, we might want to do some practice videos with you and coach you and rehearse you and do, you know, 23.5 takes and make sure it looks clean, and then send those out, get those out there, get you on a smaller show and build you up. Just like as an attorney, you know, maybe you're starting out by doing some, you know, smaller cases, you know, evictions and small crimes. You know, your first case shouldn't be to decide, you know, life or death, right? It's all something to work up to. So like Joseph says, you want to be, you know, comfortable with the medium, and that's a process. That's a long game.
And it's helpful if you've already been a news reporter, and that's actually a pretty common progression. I know a lot of people who are in TV news and left the business and went to law school. It's actually something that I thought about when I first started with TV news, and I figured, well, if the whole TV news thing doesn't go so well, I was always interested in criminal law, and I was a poli-sci major as well as broadcast journalism major. So you have at least the TV savvy factor working in your favor. And I think what's important is to also think about the area of expertise and things where perhaps you would be a voice where maybe, you know, you haven't heard one in terms of talking about a certain type of law.
Right. So, you know, we're getting squeezed for time here. I want to thank Joseph Lowe for appearing on this, and of course, Melissa as well. I'm going to try to put up some information about how to contact us. But for those who can't see it, my name is Howard Brewer. You can reach me at howard@newsroompr.com. I'm going to give you the coolest cell phone number in LA, 213-422-2738. That's 213-422-BREU, first 4 letters of my last name. Pretty easy to remember. You can check out our website at newsroompr.com. Please also check us out on Facebook. That's where we are posting a lot of our placements for folks who say, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I hear a lot of talk. What do you do? We just say, just go to our Facebook page, because we're posting so much there. I think sometimes, what was it, a couple of weeks ago, we had 3 clients in the same USA Today story, and couple of days later before we realized we hadn't even posted it. We've had days where it's like, we had a client in the front page of LA Times today and A1. Maybe we should do a social media post on that. We have a lot of tricks for getting folks press, and it's a very robust experience that helps firms in lots of different ways. Exactly how it would help your firm. Don't have a one-size-fits-all answer to that. Kind of depends on where you're trying to take it. We talk a lot with you about that, and work out a plan that makes sense. Try to find out what it means for you to get from point A to point B before we say too much about how we're going to get you there. And I would just suggest that anybody else tells you exactly how they're going to get you there before you've established where there is. Get out of there. On that note, thanks very much.
Instagram too. Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, as well as Facebook.
Yeah.
If you're not a big Facebooker.
And
Matt's been working on us on the other channels too.
Right on. Thank you, Matt. Thanks for everyone for attending, and have a wonderful weekend, wonderful holiday, and please stay safe. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody.